It wasn't until advances in PCs and the internet came along to breathe new life into what had become a distinctly separate edutainment industry. Nowadays, their classrooms have access to tons of free educational internet games, but unfortunately, these games are often not very well designed. This shift in the market is something that Gabe Newell, game developer at Steam and Valve, spoke about at the 2011 Games for Change Festival. He said, "It seems like a lot of the software that's developed is not very good. I hate that people use the fact that they're targeting the educational market as an excuse for not working as hard. People who make good games should be thinking harder about the educational capacity of what they do, and people in the educational space should be doing everything they can to build better games than we do and marketing those to the right audiences." And over the past 5 or so years, ideas like this have led to a lot of really great games. Some of them originated with an educational focus, others with a more commercial focus, but both approaches can be beneficial to schools when done right. Here's a short list of some games and the subjects that they've been used to teach. We have Portal 2. A modified version of this game has been used to teach math, physics, even language arts in schools. Dragonbox is an app that teaches young children basic algebra skills in the guise of an easy-to-learn puzzle game. Scribblenauts teaches students language arts and critical thinking skills. And of course, Minecraft has been modified into a platform for education in many different subjects. The list could go on and on, really. There are tons of them. But the question remains, what are the benefits? What are the specific benefits of these games that put them in schools? Well, before we look at those benefits, we first need to look at some of the challenges involved in using games in schools. The challenges come in a variety of, there's lots of different nuanced variations to the arguments, but they all tend to focus around a few central ideas. Unsurprisingly, these same arguments can be easily redirected at other media types that are more commonly used in schools. So, we already know some of the valid counterpoints to make to these arguments. First, we have cost. Budget limitations are common in schools. We all know that. But skilled staff gets around this through a combination of fundraising, grants, and donations. These same methods can be applied to video game acquisitions. It's also worth noting that not all games are as expensive as those big AAA titles that we've all heard of. There are more affordable options, and finding the right cost to quality balance is just part of the job. Then we have the relation to inappropriate content or inappropriate themes and violence. Well, inappropriate themes are common in all media types. We wouldn't expect to see 50 Shades of Grey in school, so we also wouldn't expect to see Grand Theft Auto in school. Then we have the challenge of actually getting the media to the student, access. This is a real concern in most schools. Again, it has to do with the budget limitations. There's already a strain in providing e-readers, or in our case, game consoles. It's a further strain on that budget. Again, those cost-cutting methods mentioned before is good. But there are other options. PCs are already ubiquitous in schools. This is a good platform to continue using for games and education. But we need to again remember to avoid those free online games that might not be the best choice. And the final real argument is probably the most important and a bit more nuanced. There's two sides of it. There's the teacher side and the student side. And this is connecting the media to the actual learning goals. On the teacher side, it's a lot like choosing a book that is the right reading level for the subject or the grade level. We wouldn't expect a kindergarten class to use a college-level textbook about colors, and we wouldn't expect them to learn colors from a complicated turn-based strategy game either, despite how strangely interesting that concept is. On the student side, we have the student's ability to actually realize what they're learning in the game. Many games attempt to address this problem, but often their solution is so heavy-handed that it completely removes the fun from the game, like so. This is a lot like comparing reading a textbook compared to reading a piece of historical fiction literature. The fiction often comes with class discussion and teacher guidance. The same should be expected from games. They take thought and guidance in the classroom. And the last argument that you hear more often than you need to is angry parents just saying that games flat out don't belong in schools, and that is wrong. Now, I'll explain further in a second, but for now, just try to calm down. You're wrong. So looking at these challenges, we can see that with the same care and consideration that educators give to other media types, we can apply those to video games. It's only when these challenges are not met well that video games are not successful in schools. So now I'd like to take a moment to talk about the benefits of games, finally. But I don't want to just talk about the benefits. I want to, wrong side. I want to show you the benefits of games in schools. So here, this is Little Big Planet. I chose this game because the level editing tool allows me to practice many of the skills that educators have identified as important for 21st century learners. Those are creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. That one. Here, we start out as the student in a classroom that is clearly boring the whole class to tears. They don't want to have anything to do with this. That is, until video games are introduced. Student interest goes up. Okay, and we saw there at the bottom, the pop-up at the bottom, and the points awarded are the first example of responsive feedback. Games offer responsive feedback to let students know quickly when they've done something good or bad, right or wrong. So this helps guide learning. Here, we have an example. We can't really read it, but the robot is thinking, hey, how do I get out of here? This is an example of tutorials. So tutorials are a great way for introducing new concepts. It's always good in schools. The next benefit of games is that they allow students to leave the classroom. I mean that metaphorically, but in this case, since it's a video game, we're literally leaving the classroom. Here we see the second element of agency that was mentioned earlier in the pop-up. Agency is simply the feeling that the student or the player has control and is able to make choices that actually matter. So let's actually make a choice. We can choose our character. Anyone? We have a ninja, astronaut, knight. Ninja it is. Okay. So in this next room, this room represents the passage of time with the clock on the wall. Here we see that given enough time and meaningful interactions with the character, which it's a small room, we don't have really meaningful interactions, but given enough time, the student is able to remove themselves from the situation. They're better able to empathize with the character and become more immersed in the learning and the story going on. This next room actually presents our first element of challenge, because it turns out that ninjas can't breathe in space. Who knew? So we need to get out of here. But we failed. This is the last element of agency that I talked about, and that is the concept that your choices actually mattered. Because we chose ninja, this room is a lot harder than it would be otherwise. But luckily, video games allow us to reframe failure as just a further opportunity for learning. So we get another try. We get to learn from our mistakes, which I clearly didn't do. So this is an example of how video games are able to cope with student frustration or learning curve If the situation is too difficult, games can dynamically adjust that difficulty level. Here it asks if we want to switch to the astronaut. Yeah, that'll make it quite a bit easier in space. So here we go. Oh, still failed, but he has a jetpack. That's okay. Now this room, as we complete this section, shows us another benefit. The STAR system is a great way to encourage students to continue to try harder and strive for improvement in their work. Something we don't often think about when it comes to games is tangential learning. And that is, this thought bubble you can't read, is the student thinking about how cool that black hole was. And they want to study, they want to study it further. Like in this library, we can go get a book and read about black holes. Yay, learning achieved. When it comes to more direct learning with video games, we have the benefit that video games address multiple learning styles. We have visual learning, auditory learning, and kinesthetic learning, all right here in the game. And look, there is a video game in a library. How cool is that? Even when the learning is not directly tied to the curriculum, we have a benefit in what's referred to as systems thinking. System thinking is just the ability to work within and work through complex systems, similar to critical thinking, but this can be applied outside of games and education in areas like military, business, government work, etc. And the last benefit of games is something that often happens behind the scenes, and that's data collection. Games collect data on everything, from simple button inputs to more complex stuff like this. But the true benefit is when games start to measure stuff like student comprehension of different learning objectives. And in cases where they need to have intervention, that data can be passed on to the teacher for further intervention from the teacher. So as we see here, with all of these elements combined, video games and teachers can make a really great team. So what we need to do is think more about video games in schools. As we think more, as we use them and talk about them more, we'll become more aware of how we can better address the challenges and difficulties that they provide us. Then we're better able to prepare students for a future that will be different than today. So let me close with, if we search hard enough or demand it loud enough, we will be able to see games that change our understanding, change what we expect from video games. And then maybe teachers will start to look at games like BioShock and not just see pointless, useless entertainment. Thank you.